the magnitude of my injuries was horrific. And I couldn't understand how I had the injuries I did based on how was I sitting in the car that led to my foot being amputated, my pelvis break on both sides. Just the way my body was injured. And then I saw myself in the car, and my right foot was on the dashboard, my left foot crossed over, and we didn't have seat belts. And upon impact, in detail, I started remembering the entire crash. And what I realized when I got over there, it was like, okay, you have to suspend that you're in your physical body. Okay, you're in like a translucent energy that can morph into different things, and you understand things through vibration, through telepathy, through these other ways of communication.
I want to welcome everybody back to the Soul Inspired. I am really inspired today because I have Nicole Kerr with me. She is someone who has had a near-death experience. I want to say thanks, Nicole, for being on the show today.
Oh, Joe, thank you for having me. I'm delighted, and I hope it'll be of benefit to your audience.
I'm sure it will, and to myself as well. I always get a lot out of just talking to my guests. There's always something that I walk away with, it seems. So I'm really excited to dig down the rabbit hole of what happened with you. So usually though, I start each episode the same way, and I try to find out, number one, I don't know when the first main experience, when the near death experience happened in your life, but if I can get just a little bit about who you were beforehand, like what you were doing in your life, who Nicole Kerr was before the accident.
Yeah, because I'm certainly not the same person I was before. After. I grew up in Jackson, Mississippi, which is real Southern. And growing up in the South in the 60s and 70s, I would say it's very conservative, very Bible Belt, very religious. And I grew up with a family with four siblings. My dad was a graduate of the U.S. Air Force Academy, went into the Marine Corps. So he was very dogmatically positioned, meaning his way or the highway. So we all grew up with a set of rules, not only the 10 Commandments, but my dad's own set of rules. And so we really knew what the consequences of not following the rules were. So I didn't date in high school. I didn't, I was, I did ballet, I did junior achievement, I did a lot of things that most of my other fellow classmates didn't do. I was on a teen board and then got selected to be 17 magazine. You probably didn't read that, but a lot of girls did back in the day and probably still do. But I was the 17 representative from the state of Mississippi. So that was kind of a neat thing to do. So into fashion and all that kind of stuff. And no military desire other than to please my father. So I did go to the Air Force Academy. I was one of the first female cadets. They started admitting women. The first class that graduated was 1980. So I decided to apply to please my dad because he wanted one of us four
Wow.
kids to go. And so imagine my shock when the principal calls out over the loudspeaker at our school, Nicole, come to the principal's office. And there is my representative on the phone from Washington saying, you've been selected to go. You start boot camp June 26th.
Wow.
And I was like, excuse my language, oh, now I got to go. Because in
Yeah.
our family, Joe, it's like if you commit to something, you have to follow it through. It's something as prestigious as going to one of the academies. And I got up there and I knew I was out of my league. I was like, all these people were varsity athletes, and the most I'd ever done was like softball. Okay. It was like, I just wasn't, I
Yeah.
passed the PFT test, but I just wasn't conditioned like they were. And it was very, very difficult for me. I mean, I made it through it, but I knew my soul was in the wrong place because the military academies train you, of course, to protect and defend the United States. So you learn how to kill people. You learn how to keep yourself as safe as possible. They throw you in survival situations, and it's rigorous and it's hard, and there's a lot of abuse and hazing that goes on, and it just wasn't who I was. but yet I couldn't quit because the thought of failure and humiliation and feeling less than, not good enough, I couldn't face that with my father and my representative and all these people that I thought I would disappoint. So I didn't give myself permission to quit when I knew I ought to. And my parents certainly didn't give me permission to quit. So my sophomore year actually is when my NDE happened, and I was a passenger in a 1965 Corvette convertible on the way back to the academy. And here's a picture for your audience. It's a 1965 Corvette convertible. And I don't know, Joe, how would you describe that car?
Not a car. That's unbelievable. Yeah. I just got
Yeah.
a glimpse of that before, and here it is again. Now I can really see it. That is unbelievable. So you were in that vehicle when it was wrecked?
Yes, I was the passenger. And what happened, I later found out because I was, of course, was pronounced dead at the scene. And I didn't wake up until the following day in the ICU at a community hospital. And I had only thing that I remembered from that ordeal was bright white lights. And that is a common occurrence for people that have NDEs. Raymond Moody, Dr. Moody, was the one who first coined the term near death experience. And he says that that's the most common element among NDEers is they see this bright, clear, it's not blinding like deer in the headlight, white light that's like this cocoon that you just feel like you are so taken care of. You're like an astronaut in outer space full of awe and wonder. And it just envelops you, and you just feel nothing but love and peace and beauty. And it's just amazing. It's really hard to even have the English language to describe the experience. But that's what I remembered, and that was it. And I even remember asking the surgeon, could it have been the operating room lights? I was a skeptic. I was like, did I wake up and see the lights and that's what my body remembered or my mind? She said, no, Nicole, you were out. She said, there was no way. It had to be something supernatural. And it turned out my memory, get this, Joe, my memory of the crash came back 19 years later. So my car crash happened at age 19. And then 19 years later, I'm going to work at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in Atlanta. And I stop at Starbucks, have my usual coffee. And all of a sudden, it wasn't the caffeine that kicked in. I remembered exactly how I was sitting in the Corvette when the crash happened. And before that, I could never understand the magnitude of my injuries was horrific. And I couldn't understand how I had the injuries I did based on how was I sitting in the car that led to my foot being amputated, my pelvis break on both sides. Just the way my body was injured. And then I saw myself in the car, and my right foot was on the dashboard, my left foot crossed over, and we didn't have seat belts. And upon impact, in detail, I started remembering the entire crash. And I talk about it in detail in my book, You Are Deathless. And I go into, I could feel myself going through the windshield, getting caught up in the air, and realizing when I hit the ground, I was going to die. I knew it. And so I called out, oh my God, help me. And at that moment, Joe, an angel came down and took me up to the other side. Now, I now know that we all have an energy body, whether you want to believe it or not, it's true. We're all energy, and we have an energy body. And upon death, that cracks open from the top down, and your soul leaves your body. So that's why I say you don't die, or you are deathless, because yes, your physical vessel is going to decay and it's going to die, but that life force energy within you that keeps you breathing, that keeps you alive, that leaves you and goes to the other side, heaven, whatever you want to call it. So when I was up in the air, that angel came and got me and took me to the other side. So I never felt the pain of the impact. And I want your listeners to know, for most people that have a traumatic experience where they die, they don't feel the pain. They really don't. And you don't have to worry about that. Their soul leaves their body before impact.
Yeah, I have heard this before with people I've talked to who've had accident or very quick deaths where it was something very traumatic, where it was going to be a very painful experience. There's even be people I've talked to who've had like drownings where they get to a point where they don't want to experience what is about to happen, and they just watch from above as
Mhm.
their body is going through, you know, reactions. I don't want to get graphic here, but they're not feeling the actual incident. So that always fascinated me that that actually can happen, right? And so just to touch on a few things because so I love how you kind of broke it down. You can tell you've definitely told a little bit of your story before because you know exactly the right things to say and where to move with it. So originally, just to reframe, and I reframe this for myself, I go over it, I just break it down a little bit. You, in the time when you had the accident and you were in this accident, you came to, right? I mean, we're skipping ahead, but they obviously brought you back to life. That's why you're here. And at that moment, you're thinking, what was all that lights? Like the lights. That was the thing that you remembered. But that was it. That was the
Uh,
main piece of what you remembered at the time. Then 19 years later, you're having a Starbucks. They put something special in your coffee, and and you remember.
if only.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of funny how it happened, but yeah,
Yeah.
and then all your memories from that moment came back in the physical and the non-physical, or just the physical memories?
No, the physical and the non-physical. It took 2 days. I actually went, instead of to work, I went to my chiropractor and I said, I'm freaking out here. I'm starting to remember the accident and I've
Mm,
never had this happen. And he said, Nicole, they're repressed memories. And he said, there's a couple of reasons why that happens. He said, before, I said, it's 19 years later. Why couldn't this have happened earlier? You know, I've just gotten on with my life. And he said, you have to have a sense of safety in your body for those memories to come up.
mhm.
Because if you don't, you're going to absolutely be overwhelmed and more traumatized than you already are. And you have to have a support system and you have to have resources to be able to deal with it. You cannot process this on your own. You have to have help. And if you don't have that available to you, you're going to go crazy because it's going to absolutely overpower you emotionally. And it is something that you have to integrate or embody and be able to digest it and understand it and realize that is you. It's not a third person it's happening to, it is actually you.
Yeah, and in a sense, you have two pieces of this puzzle because you have the physical and the non-physical part, right? And
Right.
so the physical part could be very traumatic, and that's the repressed memory that probably has to come back. And then the non-physical, sometimes I wonder, and I don't know this, this is just me talking, but I do sometimes wonder if there's times where we have experiences and we're not meant to remember for a while. Maybe there's some things that were given and then, because otherwise, what if, because I have people who've told me, they've seen future events, they've seen things that are happening, and I don't know what your entire experience was, but, I do think there's almost two pieces to that, right? Because
Yeah.
right? So does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I will tell you, I believe in guides and I believe spirit guides and I believe in angels. And angels come in many different forms. But I will tell you, my spirit guides at 19 years said, it's time you remembered. You have a particular mission. We all have a mission on this planet, but it was actually given to me by spirit when my memory returned. And he said, or it said, do not be afraid of death. That is going to be your mission to tell people that. And I'm like, okay, that's a big topic, death. Okay. And we here in America are in what I would call death denial. We
Mm,
just don't think it's going to happen to us. We don't like talking about it. It's morbid. We keep putting it off. We don't want to deal with it. Even at 80 and 90 years old, it's still like to try to get your family members to talk about their will, talk about their wishes when they die. they still don't want to do it. And it fractures families immensely, when the wishes of the person are not known to everybody and they're not written down, and you don't do the necessary preparation work. And you think of all the transitions we go through in life, Joe, marriage, having a baby, we prepare for it. You go to counseling, you take classes, there's work you do to prepare for those transitions, but none of us do, not none of us, but most of us don't do anything about death. We just keep thinking it's going to happen later
Mm-hmm.
until it doesn't. And then it blows up, and everybody's like, well, what did she want? Or, what did he want? And nobody knows, and they can't find the paperwork or whatever. And then you wind up in probate court, and then you wind up, I wanted mom silver. I mean, it fractures thousands of families, and they never talk to each other. And I'm sure that's the last thing the deceased person wanted to happen, but it happens all the time.
And then there's folks like me that when I was 16, 17 years old, I saw a movie and I don't know what movie it was. I think it was called The Usual Suspects. It was just a
Oh yeah, that's a great
action.
one.
Yeah, it's just a movie, but they were talking about death or something. Something came up, someone died, and something triggered in my head and thought, well, wait a second. When you die, oh, you're gone. And this fear just started. I was very young at the time, very young, and this fear started coming over me. And it was probably even before that was before I was 17, but that was what happened when I was younger. And then as I got to about 16, 17, this thought kept going in my mind, like, what is the purpose? And so you talk about, it's funny how you said, you were told to come back and let people not to be afraid of death. Well, you're talking to one of them. I was going through it for a lot of years, and in one sense, it was a terrible experience to have to overcome. And I don't think any of us really truly overcome it, especially if we
Right.
love our life and we want to be here. But I just mean the idea of what is beyond. So I had to start digging in young. So I was digging into near-death experiences when I was 16, 17, reading books, trying to understand. I had no idea why I was looking into this. I was like, I haven't had one. I just was totally obsessed. So it's interesting to talk to someone who's now here to say to people, don't be afraid of it. Now, that being said, do you have kind of like a Coles Notes version, as we say over here? And I don't know where you're in. I'm in Canada. I'm in Ontario, and we have like we used to say Coles Notes, which is just the short form of like an entire book.
Yes.
Of a
Cliff.
Coles Note,
We call it
Clifford,
Cliff
Cliff
Notes.
Notes, Cliff
Yeah.
Notes. That's right, right. So, do you have a short form version of what you recall happening from a non-physical place when you were hit and when everything happened with the experience?
Okay. Yes. When my soul went over with this being, in my book, I called him Casper the Friendly Ghost. I knew it was a male. I knew he was in his 30s, but I didn't have a name. I know a lot of NDEers say they see their deceased loved ones on the other side, and I just didn't have that experience yet. And what I realized when I got over there, it was like, okay, you have to suspend that you're in your physical body. Okay, you're in like a translucent energy that can morph into different things, and you understand things through vibration, through telepathy, through these other ways of communication. So I heard two beings that I'll call angels talking, and they weren't talking in English, but I was able to discern that the message they had was, we have to ask our angels for help. They are not going to interfere in our lives unless we ask them for help, unless it's an emergency, a life or death situation, which it was in my case. And I think it's important for people to understand that these angels do exist and they do want to help us. We are not alone by any stretch of the imagination on this planet. Okay, there are other planets with other beings out there, but there's a whole spiritual realm that's filled with guides and ascended masters and angels and everyone who has passed over that really do want to help us here. But we have to learn to start getting in the habit to ask. And we forget that because we get in a situation and then it'll be extreme and then we'll ask for help. But instead of just day-to-day things, and people laugh at me when I ask my angels for a parking space, but do you know, Joe, every single time they come through for me, and you have to separate what you think it's going to look like, their answer, versus, you have this preconceived idea. So it's important to suspend your disbelief. But that was one important message they had. And then when I was on the other side, the other thing that I realized is there's so many more colors than the colors in the Crayola box of 125, or at the paint store. The colors are amazing. And then with your eyes, we have to remember we have a limited vision with our eyes. We can only see maybe 45 degrees, or if you're lucky, 180. Up there, you don't have any limitations. You see 360 all at one time, and the future. So it's all these inputs that cause you to be able to just experience things at such a high frequency, and such an amazing uh, sensory perception. And there are deceased loved ones on the other side that you are communicating with, and you will see your pets over there. I want to reassure people, because a lot of times the only unconditional love that people get is from their animals, and they're very upset when their animals pass. And I want you to know they're going to be on the other side. What I had to really learn was that I was raised Lutheran and Southern Baptist. And the God that I was raised with was, let's just say, a vending machine concept, that if I put in the right behaviors and hit the Coca-Cola button, bing, Coke should come out, right?
Right.
Okay, what happens when you hit Coke and Mountain Dew comes out? That's not what I asked for, but
That's right.
that's what I got. Or nothing comes out and you're beating on the machine and you're going, why isn't this coming out? I did the right things. And
Mm.
I think that's where religion, in my opinion, has caused so much fear, because fear is not of God. God, in my opinion, and my experience on the other side, is love. It's this creative intelligence, energetic energy being. It's not a person. It's not an old man with a beard like Santa Claus that's up there keeping score on you if you're good or bad, or what your thoughts are, or any of that. In fact, it will be a relief for you to know that there's no judgment on the other side. The judgment is on this side. In fact, good and bad are words that we established on the earth plane in order to evaluate ourselves and others. Good and bad does not exist on the other side. So therefore, judgment does not exist. But if you think about it, Joe, in our society today, what's happening is people are judging first, and then the love is underneath that, and then peace is underneath that. So to get to peace, you've got to put the love at the top, because if you're loving, and that is one of the lessons, is love is the most important thing that matters, and the source of all that exists. And by source, I mean God, creator, whatever this bigger thing is that created all of this, and there's no beginning to it and there's no end to it. And that is what we all are. It's not something you have to externally hook up to get to God. God is within all of us. We are all sparks of God. And I wasn't taught that. And I
Mm.
certainly wasn't educated about my soul when I was young. The soul was something, according to the Baptists, that would burn in hell for all eternity if you did not follow the rules. And what was so confusing as a kid is the different churches had all the 10 commandments, but then they all added their own rules. The Catholic Church was, you can't do abortions, you can't have birth control, and then the Baptists, you can't dance, and the Lutherans, they all added their own man-made laws to whatever the 10 Commandments said.
Right.
And so it's interesting. I think even God would be confused if he came down here with all these different churches with all these different rules.
Right.
And it's like, I didn't say any of this. It's all designed to keep you in fear, which is a very low vibration. And in fear, if you think about it, you're acting out of your amygdala, not your prefrontal cortex. And so you're not going to make decisions in clarity. So you're not going to make them for your highest and greatest good. And that is what gets people stuck a lot, is that they're filled with fear. And when you're in fear and worry, spirit can't get through that. You're so filled with it, you're not able to hear spirit.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because I do see, I mean, I see all the comments that are left on a lot of these videos. I see some of the communications going back and forth. And to everyone's, to be respectful to everyone, everybody is raised the way they're raised.
Mhm.
We're given these guides and these rules, and we go through it. And it's interesting because someone like yourself can have this big experience, and it can be helpful in you having more clarity about the things that you grew up learning about, right? And you can see it in a different lens. And the
Yes,
real trick, the real difficult thing is to be able to, for people out there that have been conditioned a certain way, to be able to see things with that different lens without having to go through any type of experience.
that's right.
That's the real difficult part. And people will say, well, what's the point? What's the point of even trying with these people or this person or that person? Um, I really believe, though, the biggest thing that anybody can take, and this is including myself or anybody, is to have an open mind. If you have an open
Mhm.
mind, then and you start to feel what makes sense and feels right, because I hear everything you're saying, but I'm sure there's people that are going to hear that and say, oh my goodness, this is craziness, this, I just know it, based on some of the comments I've seen.
Yeah, yeah,
And then on the other side, you'll see people who are completely in support of it because they've had their own experiences, or that's their belief system, right? So belief systems are just, it's a real tricky area for a lot of people. But I would just say to people to have that open mind the best you can, and then allow the truth to come through you. And if the truth is what you already believe, then that's completely up to that person,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Um,
I completely agree, and I am presenting an alternative view that I realize would be for a lot of people, and it is trying to help people understand that God was never about fear. And so any institution, anybody that's telling you that God is fear, in my opinion, is doing you a disservice, because it's keeping you from being the being you were born to be, because you're scared all the time. And that is what's running your energy system. And you're never going to actually be the to get to a higher frequency or a higher level of being, or on Maslow's hierarchy, that self actualization, when you're stuck down here in fear and worry all the time. And in my book, I just wanted to read real quick. I do something called NET, neuro emotional technique, with clients, and I work with kids. And I had a little 6-year-old girl who was in a fundamental church, and she was told she was bad, and she was adopted. And so her belief system was that if she's bad, then her parents could possibly disown her. So
mm,
being adopted, she was scared to death. She was wetting the bed. She was getting up all night, wanting to go into her parents' bedroom. So they came to me and said, "Can you help us?" And I said, "Well, let me see how she sees God." And so I asked her, and she eagerly told me, I'm going to read this from the book: God is a blue spirit with colors and balloons and all different colors, no head, and can talk.
wow.
And clearly, this little girl is having a direct experience with God. No filters from other people are involved. And, your own experience with God, source, whatever you want to call it, will probably look nothing like hers or mine. I just hope my story will encourage you, like you said, to keep an open mind, to not just take the generations that have come before you and assume that their beliefs are correct.
Right.
Because none of us are going to surely, you never get to the end of the road with this. Your concept of God is going to continue to evolve, and you're not going to, unless you have that direct experience of God and that knowingness. And that is something everybody has to have on their own, in order to truly, understand that, whoa, that's why I call myself, having gone from an NDE to a STE, a spiritually transformative experience. Because had I not had this and remembered it, um, I will tell you, I probably would still be, going, just doing the dutiful duty of going to church. And most people now just go at Christmas and Easter. It's gotten churches are losing attendance, because
Mhm.
it is, it's become a very rule based way of living, and most of us are understanding that is not freedom. That is not, if you question authority and they don't like that, then you're ousted, or you're looked on as somehow being less than or not good enough if you divorce, or if you had an abortion, or if you had all these things, and so much of it gets politicized as well. But I think it's important that people just become aware, ask questions, and that's why I think my book is such a good book for book studies, book groups. Get this as a book and start talking about, what is your concept of death? What do you think is going to happen? I guarantee you will get to know the other members of your book club in a more intimate way than you can ever imagine. Because here's the deal in life: we never know when our last day on this earth is going to be. There's no guarantee for any of us. And Joe, if we actually lived with that awareness that we could die any moment of any day, we would be more present. Okay.
Mm.
We would be in the present moment, and we would live in a deeper, kinder, more loving and empathetic way, with respect to others, with respect to Mother Earth, and respect to all sentient beings.
I agree with that 100%. And I understand everything you're saying. And one thing that, you know, growing up a little, I was in and out of the church at times, but the one thing I did always love, I will say I did love about church, is the community,
Yes.
is
Yes.
community building and things like that. And I think there are really good intentions on some areas of it, and then it's like you said, there are things about it that people should just allow an open mind and question a little bit, because there are times where we just become who we're told to become. And I don't think that's really what we're supposed to do. I think we're supposed to question things at times in our life. I wanted to take just a left turn for a second and ask you about, you said something really interesting. I've never asked this question, but you said that angels are listening to us, but we have to ask the questions, right?
Mhm.
So somebody, this isn't really a skeptical type question, but it would be somebody listening in, possibly might say to themselves, okay, so I have to ask the angels questions, and that's how I'll get, these questions answered. But people have situations in life at times where something, say, tragic happens, or they want something to happen and it doesn't happen a certain way, and
Right.
they think, where were you when I needed you, and why aren't you helping me, why aren't you just doing things for me? So I guess the question I would have is, why is it necessary to ask, and why aren't they just taking care of us?
It's a great question.
Yeah.
Um, they don't interfere because of free will. And we have free will, which means we have a choice. In every decision we make, we have a choice. And we have consequences to those choices either way. And the angels are not going to interfere in that gift of free will unless they are asked to do so. And that is a hard concept, I think, for a lot of people to get, because I truly had a hard time, because I grew up where God was dual. He was loving and protective, and on one side, but yet if you didn't follow the rules, it was going to be punitive, judgmental. You go to hell. So I always, that side outweighed the loving side. And I could never understand, when I prayed and was in a situation, why something didn't turn out the way I thought it needed to. And we have to realize there's a bigger, more cosmic and benevolent purpose in our life. And we can't see how what the decisions and the learning experiences that we're getting here on earth play into that bigger cosmic consciousness. And I think that's hard, because we have to honor both the human side and the spiritual side. And the human side, when someone dies, is having to process the grief, the suffering, uh, that loss, that all of those different emotions, and we have to hold that with care and compassion. But there is a bigger cosmic consciousness and benevolence that is going on here that we don't understand, but we need to just start understanding that things are happening for a reason, and that in truth, the universe is working for us, not against us. But when you're filled with fear and worry, you tend to believe that it's working against you. Your belief systems usually lend itself to that and being more negative. And if you're thinking about that all the time, then they wind up manifesting. And so you have to start switching your way of thinking and seeing that all things um, are in a divine order. And I know it's hard when things don't go the way you think it's going to go, or something terrible happens to somebody and you go, why did that have to happen? Or me, I was a good girl. I mean, I did everything I was told up until that moment of the car crash. I actually had 2 beers and a cigarette the day, first time at 19. Most people are doing that at 14 or 13. I'm going to have some fun in my life. And boom, I felt like I just got slapped down, and I couldn't understand it and make sense of why that would happen to someone like me.
Mm.
So, it's that, why do bad things happen to good people? But you have to ask for that help from the angels so that they have the permission to intervene,
Mm.
because that is, it's just like, you wouldn't want me to tell you what to do, right? You would want me to ask
Right,
and
right.
say, how would it's a big difference. And just coming in and assuming that, and that's just the other thing, is we always think we know what something is going to look like, what would be the best for someone. And I've changed my prayers to, instead of specifically praying that this person gets well and lives, because that might not be for their highest and greatest good. They may be in so much pain or suffering or whatever. They're ready to leave this planet. They've
Mm.
done what they came to do. We don't know that. And we're just thinking about ourselves, and we want what we want for that person
Mm.
instead of what their highest and greatest good is. So that's how I pray now, is please, whatever is the best and highest for this person, please let that happen to them. And that is a different way of praying than I was taught, because I was taught to pray, and there was a prayer position you had to get into, Joe, with at the bed, on your knees, with your hands folded and down. And if your prayer wasn't answered, well, you weren't in the prayer position, or, you didn't say it right. Or, I mean, it was always on us. It was always on me that
Right.
I didn't do something right, that the prayer didn't get answered the right way, instead of realizing that we are being taken care of. And we came in, and this may be a bit of a stretch for some of your audience, but you have a soul contract when you come in to learn lessons. And when you have learned that, you're ready to go. Okay. And none of us know what each other's lessons are unless we talk about it, and we really, uh, have a discussion about that, what we think it is. But most of us run around unconscious and don't really think about what that is. And then when we pass, it's like, okay, you're going to have a life review. And that is something, you're not going to be judged, but you are going to have a life review. So during that life review, we learn how everything that we thought, said, did during our physical presence here on earth, how that impacted ourselves, others, and the world. So it's important to start learning these lessons now and to put them into practice. And there's 10 common lessons from NDEs. They're in my book. They're on my website. They're coming from the 2020 annual report from the International Association of Near-Death Studies. So it's scientifically based. And the first one, of course, is we don't die. And that's what I talked about earlier, where our soul lives on. But they're very comforting. And one of the ones that we here in America still need to get is everyone and everything is connected. A lot of us think that we're not. We're not connected to Mother Earth, or we're not connected to animals, or we're not connected even with race or stuff like that. And in the military, one of the things I learned is we all bleed red. Okay. So it doesn't matter what your race is, what your ethnicity is, what your sexuality is. When you've taken a hit, a gunshot wound, or something, we all bleed the same color inside. All of our skeletal systems are white. Okay. We
Mm.
all are the same. We all are one consciousness at a bigger level. And that is what having this near death experience has helped me see, is to get out of just the minute not minute, but your time here on earth and this incarnation is very short compared to the bigger realm of life and what we're learning and how we keep evolving our soul's evolution.
Yeah, and even I could even take that further and say, we are, like you said, we all have a white skeletal, we're all bleeding red. Who knows what else is out there?
Oh
Because they
yeah.
could be bleeding green, but the point is we are the physical, right? And we're
Yes,
all the same. We are part of the physical, and then the non-physical is connected, right? So it's so you just touched on so many great things, and you know, one of the main things that it's funny to hear you talk about the idea of asking, and with almost like with the impact you're asking, when you send that prayer out, you're saying it, well, in the best intention of the impact of that person. It's not about you, right?
right,
So
right.
if the impact is going to be greater for that person to be able to move on because they're not in a good place anymore, then that's what you want that person to continue to progress in whatever we're doing here, like this whole
That's
purpose, right?
that's
So
exactly right.
yeah, so I think that was one fascinating thing. And the other thing was, you hear about all these people talk about manifesting, and when science kind of comes along and says, keep seeing seeing in what you desire and the things you have. And what people don't realize is they're receiving prayers. They're receiving probably prayers from their angels because they're asking and
Yes,
receiving. Right? I mean, I'm kind
yes,
of
yeah, yes,
connecting the two
yes,
things,
yes.
but they're not seeing it that way. They're seeing it as a different, maybe they are. But it's just the way you were talking, I'm hearing all these things that I've studied over time, and it's just interesting that it all kind of comes back full force. One thing I was going to ask you was, in the experience you had so you go out, you're seeing the colors, you're seeing the angels that were having conversation, you said, based on
Yeah.
your asks, or was it your,
I just heard them.
you just heard
I
them?
just, yes, I'm on the other side and I have this angel next to me and I'm hearing these two next to me. And I know I was specifically meant to hear that and come back and tell people that as well. And, they're not only angels, beyond the veil, they're angels here on earth too. They come in and like in my case, it was the EMT. I consider him an angel. My thoracic surgeon was an angel. She was the first medical surgeon in Colorado Springs. She got the call that night. And my nurse, she was obsessive compulsive disorder, but I needed that for my care because it was so high, and she was always paying attention and going overboard. I had severed my wrist as well as my leg. And anyway, I couldn't open the carton of milk they would come on the tray with in the
Right.
hospital. So she would always take the time to open the milk, put the straw in, and put it up to my mouth. That level of detail is what my care needed. And I was sent that person who had that compulsion to make sure every little detail was met. So I am well aware that angels come in human form as well. And you will see people that they'll intervene and they'll help you, and you'll have no idea where they ever go or who they were, or it was just a moment in time that an angel came in a human form to help you. And we incarnate in different ways. You can incarnate to just come here to help earth raise its vibration. You can be an interplanetary soul coming in from another planet that has already have a higher vibration. They respect each other. They come into earth to help us raise our vibration. And there's angel incarnation. So there's different levels, just like our soul's evolution is that everybody is at a different level. We're not all up here or we're not all down here. We're all at different stages in the human evolution or the soul evolutionary journey. That's why not everything resonates with everybody. So you take what you
Right.
like and you leave the rest, so to speak,
Mm.
on how you're able to take this information and become aware and go up to that next level. And some people just aren't ready to hear it. They're just unconscious and they're going to stay unconscious the rest of their journey here. But at some point along their evolution, they will wake up.
Right. No, I've never had it explained that way. that is why some people are in a different place. I mean,
Yes.
and the funny part, us as humans, if we get into a discussion with someone who's not in the same place as you, naturally you want to say, well, no, listen, like this is what you should believe, and this is what you should think, and this is what you should feel. And meanwhile, they're not there. Like
That,
they're seeing you like
yeah.
you're okay, like I don't know what you're talking about. So that's a really good way to look at it, that it's a constant progression. Doesn't mean anyone's better or worse than anyone,
No,
but
it's,
it's just
yeah.
that progression of your awakening, right, into
Yes.
what's coming. So did it feel, so it's I always ask this question with everybody, but it's usually because they tell me, they woke up in their hospital bed and they had remembered the entire experience, right? Yours is a little different, where
Mm-mm.
it took
Yeah.
that, you had that amnesia, that spiritual and
Yeah.
physical amnesia for 19 years before you remember it. But in the remembrance of it, in recalling the spiritual side of it, did that experience feel as real as here?
Oh, realer. It was
Okay.
more real. It was more real.
Is there
I
any way
could,
you can
I,
explain that? It's hard to explain in human, probably.
yeah, if we had, I don't know if we have time, but I can read like in my book how I wrote it, about just what I felt, and how I experienced it. And it was better to put it into words than
For
language,
sure.
you know?
Yeah.
So, it just, I just was able to immerse myself in it. And it just like came to me all of a sudden. And it was like, I was one with God. God was one with me. I felt like, uh, God was this pure presence, fullness, oneness, but most of all, God was love. God was, no strings attached, open arms love. And there's no need to be forgiven for anything. There's no stern father up there. My mistakes didn't even exist, and they never had. And that's what we have to give ourselves some grace on this planet when we make mistakes, because they're about learning. And that if you learn from your mistakes, you are evolving and you are growing. And I realized when I was on the other side, the life that I left behind, I could see myself in the ditch. I could see my clothes that I was wearing. I could see how mangled I was. I did not want to go back into that body, because I didn't know if I was going to be dependent on my parents the rest of my life, if I'd
Mm.
ever have independence. Would I be put right back into going to church again on Sunday? And I was so like disconnected from that God. And then until my memory came back, I felt like I was in a wandering place of going to church and different churches, trying to figure out what God meant to me and what happened to me. And then when my memory came back, it was like, wow, okay, now I'm on a different path here. But you know, it's really a life altering experience. And I came back and I have had, I'm sensitive to so many things, Joe. I can't handle a lot of noise. I can't handle crowds. I can't handle toxins, negative energy. You find people that have had that experience, that they have to put boundaries up. They have to buffer themselves and protect themselves, because they get really, they're very empathetic type of people, and sensitive souls. And my husband's a musician, and it's like, oh my gosh, can you turn the volume down? But it's important that you honor that and realize that's all part of what you went through, and you come back with a heightened sensory, uh, perspective, and just being. And I just want to also say, I know as an author, authors tend to write about death as doom and gloom, and it's not that at all. My own experience, along with hundreds of thousands of other people that have had near-death experience, that death is absolute beauty, light, loving kindness, and this peace that passes all understanding. I get that from the church. I do remember that part.
Yeah.
And on the other side. And so there really is nothing to fear in death. And I hope people will start examining what their fears are. And I do have a fear checklist in my book that you can go through. Are you scared that, your family won't make it without you, that you're not leaving a legacy, or whatever your fears are, to work through them and see if it really is false evidence appearing real, as the acronym usually stands for.
Right. Well, I love that. Thanks for digging in a little bit with that. It's something that I've always tried. Our reality is we wake up out of our bed and we look at our ceiling. We might put our feet down and feel the floor. We go downstairs, make our coffee. That's our real. Like
Yes.
this is my real. So when people explain what they go through, and I've been talking to a number of people now, I go, well, that's completely different than grabbing my cup of coffee in the morning. That how is that real? Like, what are you seeing? And it's interesting to see people try to explain it with the English language or just human ways of explaining it. And they'll say, well, it's more real. But I'm like, well, it doesn't sound more real, because are you actually physically seeing everything? They're like, well, no, I'm seeing everything. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I am seeing everything. I can see everything. No, you're not seeing everything. And it's just like, we kind of go back and forth and say, because sometimes I'll dialogue after the interview, and it just gets funny, because I'm still trying to figure it out myself, but it's this is why we have these episodes, and to kind of try to let people see that there is more going on than we're allowing ourselves to believe. And the message I got from you today was to not surround yourself in the negativity and the fear that some of us are almost bred into from
Mhm.
birth, because there's a lot of beauty that comes from who we are at our core. And so that's what I'm getting, at least from this
Yeah. Yeah.
message. So I really
Yeah.
do appreciate it. The biggest thing that I'm trying to really raise awareness with my show is, you mentioned a few times to me, you said when you came back, you couldn't be around loud noises. You had kind of these different, I don't want to say symptoms, but you came back with things
Yeah,
that
they
you might have
are.
had, right? There are kind of different symptoms than before you were here.
Yes.
I have always been a very sensitive kid and very empathic, very sensitive my whole life. I am a musician, but I like a place where I'm sitting there with an acoustic guitar on a stool and I have a big crowd and I can just play it. Like, that's it. I don't like big loud sounds, and I'm not really like, I'm okay with it, but I can only handle it for so long, big crowds. And yet I didn't have an NDE, but I've always been very sensitive to everything. So I don't know what all this means. Maybe the last day before I leave this earth, I'll remember something that happened. I don't know. You took you 19 years. I don't really know. I don't know why this has always been ingrained in me
Well,
from childhood.
it's interesting that we have a phrase when we see a baby. A lot of times we'll look at it and we'll go, "That's an old soul." Have you ever seen that
Yes, yes,
or
yeah,
heard that? Yeah,
yeah,
that is truly an old soul. They look like an older person, and otherwise you see a baby and they're all like just a total different expression, and the old souls usually are more serious looking. They just have a presence and energy, and their physical look is older, and that is to me someone who has come through many incarnations, and they're coming through again, and they have evolved to a higher state of consciousness. And maybe that's what you are. You're an old soul that has come through many, many times, and you have evolved to this sensitivity.
yeah.
And it really does affect you when justice isn't done, when people are mistreated, when animals are mistreated or not respected, and especially what we do to planet Earth, is the amount of resources that we're pulling from her and taking from her so that we can enjoy our luxuries and our, uh, uh, what do I want to say, our first class, first world lifestyle a lot of times,
Hmm.
I keep thinking, I came from Hawaii just 3 years ago to North Carolina, and they have had a power outage in downtown Honolulu in Chinatown. And so these businesses have been losing thousands of dollars, and the community is coming out to support them. But you think about what happens when we lose electricity. And with these heat waves going on, it puts people in a very uncomfortable, angry, agitated place. But then the internet goes out as well. Okay. And so we don't have doctor's appointments to go to. And it forces you to have to become still, and it forces you to have to communicate, and it changes, just like COVID did, it changes our behavior. And so we need to be more mindful of these kind of things. And I think, we're at a point in I think humanity where we're looking at the light coming in and shining through into the darkness. Just to be honest with you, Joe, these are what these times are about. There's massive division. We're seeing it politically, we're seeing it institutionally. I used to work for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and now I've seen, the amount of trust people have in that organization is at an all-time low because of things that happened during the pandemic. They weren't being honest, and forthright. And we had looked to these previous institutions to, blatantly, we trusted them with the information that they were giving us. So now, we're being more skeptical. We're asking more questions. We're having to think for ourselves instead of just being fed information and just told to trust it. And I think that's coming same way you're waking up with religious institutions as well. And I think it's our brain is time to become aware of what we're more capable of being and doing. And it's not just about us here in America, it's about the whole world, and that we are one consciousness and we are one, literally. And musicians sing about this: we are the world, we are, all these things, and love, and how important that is with John and Lennon especially. And these concepts aren't trivial. They are the most important things. And that's why I think it's about more and more people are starting to awaken to this truth, and the materialism is starting to fade, especially with, I think, the younger generation. They're more experiential oriented instead of let me accumulate things, and then the next generation doesn't want them. I mean, nobody wants grandma's china set that was worth thousands of dollars because they're not setting formal dinner parties anymore. They're happy with
Right.
paper plates. You know,
Right. Right. No,
I don't know.
absolutely.
I don't know how I got off on all of that, but
No, no, I was going to say when you said that light is showing the darkness, it's like light is now showing the dark corners of what we've been living, and that's
yes,
that's just the truth of it. So we are now seeing these things, and there must be a reason why it happened. It's so that we can grow and evolve, and here we are growing and evolving. And yeah, I always have felt like an old soul. People generally think that I'm actually old, younger than I am because I've kept a youthful appearance, but my seriousness has always been serious. I was writing songs about feeling alone at like 10 years old, and my mother would be like, "What are you doing? Like, can we do something that's like fun? Like, do like a fun song?" And I'd be like, "No, like we need to I was writing like serious, like young.
yeah.
So
And for you to be thinking about death at such a young age, and death didn't happen to you. And that's one of the other things I want to say regarding your listeners who are parents. And if you have a loss of a parent and you have children, my sister lost her husband to ALS when her children were 10 and 14, and that's a horrible disease. It really is. But the younger one asked, Mom, are you going to die? And of course, she wants to protect his heart and not have him worry or have anxiety. So she said, "No, I'm not going to die. I'm healthy. I'm fine. I'm going to, you're going to be okay. Mommy's going to be around." And here's the truth: it needs to be age appropriate. I'm going to put that in parentheses, okay? But we need to be honest with our children, and we need to say, you know, I don't know when I'm going to die. Life is not a guarantee. Okay. I'm in good health. I don't plan to die. I'm going to do everything I can to stay well and, healthy and alive, but something could happen. I could be in an accident, or I could lose all my functions. I don't know that, but I do want you to know that I love you and that I don't plan to. And if I should, Aunt Nicole and Uncle James are going to take you. That's who I've designated to take you. So you'll live with them. You may have to change schools since they live in a different state. You'll be financially taken care of. You don't have to worry about money, and your brothers and sisters are all going to go with you. So it reassures them that there's a plan in place if it happens. Because the worst thing that could happen is that something does happen to you and you pass away, or you become uh, in a vegetative state, or something horrific happens. Then the child is left wondering, okay, mommy lied to me. She said she wasn't going to go away.
Mm.
She wasn't going to die. And then they feel responsible to try to figure out what to do next because they were never told of the plan. So, like I said, it's important to start having more honest conversations about death. And I think to transform the whole narrative around death, that it is part of the life cycle and it's going to happen, and we don't need to sit around and talk about it every day, but we
Right.
do need to have a plan in place, and we do need to understand, if this happens, what are your wishes and what would you want to happen, and just have a more conversation of it. And even young kids, the suicide rate is going off the charts here, and with the you know my nephew's 21-year-old friend just died from a fentanyl overdose,
Oh.
and it's so sad because it's affecting so many people. And of course, you don't think you're going to die at that age. You think you're immortal, nothing's going to happen to you. And the truth is if we had these discussions earlier, that they could say, oh, this is what I would like, or this is what would be neat, or I want to be cremated, or I don't want to, or whatever, because
Mm.
otherwise it falls on the parents to make the decision, or somebody else in the family, and it may not have been what you wanted. So it really is important to start talking and planning. And you don't, like I said, once you get most of that out of the way, then you get on, talking about more pleasant things. But it is a necessary conversation. And it's the only thing that's going to happen to all of us. We're out of, a lot of people can get out of taxes now. It used to be taxes and death, but now it's just death.
Right. No, and you know what? I appreciate you actually mentioning that. No one's ever mentioned that on any of the episodes before because it is important. I have three kids myself, actually. So those are conversations, they'll probably someday see some of these episodes and say, Dad, why are you so obsessed with death? What is going on? It's not that I'm obsessed with death. I just think that there should be awareness around it better than there has been in the past
Yes,
200 years, maybe more. Like, I just don't think we're doing things correctly. And if we had a better understanding of why we're here and what's to come, we may appreciate life a little bit more. And at the same time, not have this massive fear and base our entire life off our fears around death. Right. So thanks for bringing that
exactly.
up. I really think that's
Yeah.
great. And yeah, it is age appropriate. Obviously, you don't want to go tell your toddler that yet, like, let's give them a little time to enjoy some life.
Yeah.
But a couple last things. Just one of the things I usually ask everybody is, you mentioned you have a book, you work with people. How do people connect with you if they're interested in working with you? Could I get that information from you?
Yeah, go onto my website, NicoleKerr.com, and you can find out all about me. I will tell you just right now, I'm on hiatus from working with people. I'm giving myself some off time, sabbatical, so to speak, to talk about my book and to just work on I have continuing health issues from my car crash that I have to deal with. So I've taken some time to work with me and myself. And also, if you're interested in my book, I want Hey, do you know what this is right here? BTDT. That's a credential. Do you know what it is, Joe? What
I
that
don't, and
stands
I know
for?
I don't. What is that?
Been there, done that. So
Oh,
that makes me the expert to be on your show to talk about NDEs.
I love that. That is
And
perfect.
yeah, so you can find it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, or your independent bookstore. I also have it on Audible. I use my own voice to narrate it, which was really hard to read. It's one thing to write your story, then another to read it out loud, and then another to listen to it
Yeah,
in your own voice.
I bet.
It's different levels of integration and embodiment, but I hope you'll pick it up, or gift it to someone that may be in fear of death. And it also deals with trauma. It deals with God. It deals with family, all these different, and identities, people pleaser, that may help you when you're a little kid and need to survive. But as you get older, you realize that you're pretzeling yourself to say what somebody else wants, what you think they want to hear, instead of being authentic with your voice and risk conflict or blowback from them because you spoke your truth. So it's an identity we need to let go of, along with other identities, to let go of it, bring a death to those identities and become your true being, who that is, and remembering who that is.
And for those interested in the book, you do go a little more in detail with how it happened, what happened, and because we could only touch on a few things. So I appreciate that.
I'll send you a free chapter if you write me on my website, and you can at least get a style. It took me 13 years to write the book. So,
Wow.
I came from a science background in writing, so I had to switch to something uh, totally different to write this book. And it is authentic and coming from my heart. And my intention was to be effective for people in this mission of that I've been gifted to not fear death.
Well, it's a beautiful thing. I always appreciate authors too, because I mean, as a musician, releasing music is such a huge passion for me. And, for someone, I think some people overlook the fact that it takes your heart, your soul, your sweat, you're up all night sometimes writing. Like those are things that's your life. It's part of your life purpose. So to appreciate it. And I appreciate you being on here. The last question I always leave everybody with, and it's whatever comes to your heart when I ask the question. It's just, it's pretty basic, but it's why are we here? Why do you believe we incarnate and why we're here?
Love, to learn to love ourselves and one another, because so many of us don't. We hate ourselves or we shame ourselves. We don't truly love ourselves, and that's been a journey for me. And that's how I would summarize it. And once you can learn to love yourself, your body, who you are, peel back all the layers and become who you are, and love that beautiful, radiant spirit of love, then you are able to love others and be kind, and it just comes natural. It really does.
And there's so many ways we can learn to love ourselves through
Yes.
meditation, through quiet time, through doing the creative work we like to do, being good to yourself, not doing that job that you absolutely can't stand every day, just finding yourself through life, right?
And putting boundaries up with people,
Yeah.
really limiting bullying and negativity and all of that kind of stuff. And watching the news, take a break from that because it's not uplifting. If stuff is not giving you a higher vibration, and music is great for that. That's one of the things that really uplifts everybody is music. So listen to it.
I appreciate you being here today. I like to
Yeah, same
say,
here.
yeah, thank you so much to everybody that's been subscribing. Please like, share, and subscribe to the Soul Inspired. Make sure you follow everybody all the guests I have on. I've been so blessed to have everyone on. Nicole was on today and gave her time. So please go and check her out. And thank you again, Nicole, for
Thank
being
you.
on the show today.
I enjoyed it. Thank you.
So